35% of Olivetti shares are now in the hands of a few Italian companies, amongst which are Fiat, Pirelli, Mediobanca, and IRI, the Institute for Industrial Reconstruction, a public company whose job was to restructure private companies that were in bad shape after World War II. The vice chairman of IRI is charged with the presidency of Olivetti, while a manager from Fiat is appointed CEO. Both the new president and the CEO refuse to further finance the electronics division, because as far as they see, electronics is a risky venture Olivetti can't afford. Mechanics, that's the field Olivetti should focus on. It has been its core business for years, it will be its future. That's what the new CEO claims on the pages of Business Week. To be fair, back in the 60s, almost no Italian entrepreneur would have considered electronics to be a sensible investment. Managers simply ignored what this new field was about, and therefore they weren't able to foresee how lucrative it was going to become in a few years. That's why Vittorio Valletta, chairman of Fiat, stated that Olivetti was in a good shape, except for the electronics division, a flaw that management must eradicate. And that's what they did, in 2 steps. In the August of 1964, Olivetti creates a new company, Dioge, Olivetti General Electric. The name speaks volume. They partner with General Electric, the multinational conglomerate that is battling IBM for the control of the computer market. Oge absorbs the electronic division, while Olivetti focuses on typewriters and mechanical calculators. 4 years later, in 1968, Olivetti is no longer part of Oge. It sells its shares and leaves the electronics segment. Computer science in Italy has no future at this point. This is the end of the line. Olivetti, the leading company in electronics, left all of its assets in the hands of an American firm. Apparently, the country cannot afford to compete in the computer rush. It hasn't the resources, the means to finance research and organize mass production. And yet, someone does not agree. Against all odds, in the most hostile environment, a 3-man team will manage to devise and produce the first commercial personal computer, the Programma 101. They belong to the so-called Perotto team, named after the lead engineer, Piergiorgio Perotto. 2 teammates work by his side, Giovanni de Sandre and Gastone Garziera. Who are they? Engineers and experts in electronics, the members of the Perotto team, all worked in the Olivetti's electronics division before it was given to General Electric. But how did the Perotto team manage to avoid the transfer and stick with Olivetti? Well, it may seem odd, but they just made themselves unlikable. Back in '64, when the division was to be absorbed by Oge, Giorgio Perotto hinted that something was wrong. He was right, even if at the time he couldn't know a thing. You see, a few years later, General Electric closed the Italian electronics division, fired most of the personnel, packed everything up and sent it back to the US. Anyway, Perotto did his best to convince the managers to leave his team out of the deal. He acted all uptight around the General Electric personnel, battling them over every small topic that came up during the meetings they had before finalizing the division's acquisition. Eventually, the whole Olivetti Electronics division was acquired by Oge, except for the Perotto team, which remained under Olivetti's wing. This new situation was far from ideal, though. Deals were done, promises of cooperation between the two companies were made. But the reality was quite different. The Perotto team and the rest of the newly founded Oge Electronics division shared the same lab, the same cafeteria, the same parking lot. But they now belong to two different companies that didn't want their industrial secrets to be leaked. It was like having a wall dividing the lab into two areas. And sometimes this wall was real, because for instance, the two teams were asked to enter and leave the building at different times. You never know what can slip out while chatting. This is also the reason why Perotto took some photos portraying the team in front of the pieces they were working on. You can see these shots on our site, italianculturepodcast.com. You'll notice how they all look a bit uncomfortable. They weren't shooting those pics to have a nice souvenir. It's evidence of their work, just in case. This situation was both a curse and a blessing. On one side, the company was completely focused on pushing the production of mechanical machines that, according to the high ranks, would have saved the company. This means that the Perotto team didn't have a big budget, and more importantly, was perceived as a group of outcasts by the main core of the company. On the other side, though, no one was keen to discover how they were spending their days. Managers just weren't interested in checking on them, as long as they didn't bother the company with strange requests. Only Roberto Olivetti, son of Adriano, tried to shield and encourage the work of the team, until the rest of the BOD managed to corner him and tie his hands. Due to Roberto Olivetti's efforts, and to this strange situation, the team had the freedom to pursue its own agenda without any restraint. Gastone Garziera was one of the last acquisitions of the Perotto team. He describes the bizarre position they were in.
Perché non c'erano input, siamo stati quasi dimenticati.
There were no inputs from above. Management almost forgot we existed. Valletta said Olivetti should focus on mechanical products, so we were considered to be some kind of blight. Luckily, no one knew we were still active, or they would have shut down our team. This was the harsh environment that gave birth to the Programma 101.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In order to fully grasp the sense of what the Programma 101 represented within the scope of computer science, it would be better to have a quick look at what was considered to be a computer back in the days. And glorious days they were. The 4th of October 1957, a long cylinder made of metal and fire leaves the cosmodrome in Baikonur, piercing the atmosphere and delivering the first human satellite orbiting around the Earth. The Soviet Union has just launched the Sputnik 1. 1 year later, the explorer left Cape Canaveral, then Yuri Gagarin. Finally, the moon landing. Space was certainly conquered by brave men and women who put their lives at risk to push the boundaries of what is known a little further. But they weren't reckless explorers who took a risk for the sake of it, not at all. Those missions required extremely careful planning and precise calculations, most of which were carried out by mysterious mainframe computers. Deep in the bowels of the research centers, these looming monsters pulsed, weird and clanked, crunching numbers. Those numbers put humankind in space, but could have also erased it. The earliest phases of the space rush coincided with the most delicate moments in the Cold War. Mainframes were also used to calculate the most convenient trajectory for a missile to obliterate the other faction, before, or even after, the enemy had released his deadly rain on your country. So these enigmatic machines were somehow perceived as responsible for the ever-looming war. Some sort of Damocles sword hanging over the head